Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Bears Brothers podcast. The Bears 2017 schedule was just released legitly like a minute ago, and tonight's show is all about our instant reaction and analysis of it. I'm your host, Will DeWitt, and tonight I will be joined by my fellow Bears brother, Nick Moriano, because Brandon Hazlett has the night off. So, Nick, how's it going, short stuff?
It's going good. I missed last week, so we get to talk about the schedule that was just released, and we definitely have some interesting opinions about it, and it might be a tough one this year for us, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get there in just a second, but you came out with a mock draft today, and you had a surprising third pick. Do you want to defend yourself here? Because you're getting a little bit of flack, but also a little bit of love.
You know, I saw it. I saw both mixed reactions. I knew that I would get mixed reactions, especially with the Bears going with Patrick Mahomes with the number 3 overall pick. But there's just been this constant fluctuation with just a whole bunch of media members just talking about these quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot of them drafted in this first round. And I think if the Bears are legitly wanting to get a quarterback, it's going to be in the first or second round. Might as well go get the guy that, has more upside and maybe potentially could be, a starter down the road, a future face of the franchise. And I just saw Mahomes, and I just saw a guy who could, make every throw. He has obviously the strongest arm in the draft, and, he won't start this season. Mike Glennon's the guy this season, and, give him some time to develop. I know he comes from a spread offense in Texas Tech, but hey, it doesn't mean that he can't be successful in the NFL. But yeah, I got a lot of mixed reviews there, but I don't think anyone really knows what the Bears are going to draft at number 3 overall. So
nobody knows. But for me, Mahomes at 3, yeah. But at the same time, if Pace did pull the trigger, you gotta trust him enough. Like, that's his guy. Then if that's his QB1, you gotta go with it. But really, this has been a pretty big week. The Bears, they started OTAs a few days ago. We're now 7 days away from the NFL draft, and on top of that, the schedule just came out. But speaking of the draft, I think this would be a good time as any to let our fans know our plans for it. So if you're listening, I better grab a pen and paper and take some notes, because on Monday, that'll be April 24th, we're going to have a show unveiling each of our 4th and final Bears mock drafts. Then on Thursday, we're going to go live right before the Bears are actually on the clock with that 3rd overall pick. And then we're going to instantly analyze whoever it is Ryan Pace drafts with that selection. That said, if the Bears do end up trading down, depending on how far down they go, we might have to hop off air for a little while and come back in once the Bears are back on the clock. And then for days 2 and 3, we're going to do shows as well. But for these, we're going to go ahead and start after each day has ended. Because with those days, there's so much trading going on. We just don't know how many times the Bears will be on the clock, when they'll be on the clocks. And plus, there's going to be more than one player to break down. Who knows? There might be more than one player at the end of the first round. But either way, we need a little bit more time to prep, and then we'll go live at the end of the 2nd and 3rd day. And then the week after, another nugget for you guys is that we're going to have a very special guest on the show, as we're going to have Larry Mayer, the senior writer at ChicagoBears.com, on the show to look back at the draft as a whole. And I can't wait to have him on the show. That's going to be huge. So needless to say, Nick, it's going to be a busy couple weeks for us, but it's very, very exciting. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But with that, let's just move right along and get to the main event. And let's break down the Chicago Bears 2017 schedule that consists of 2 primetime games, which are back-to-back in weeks 4 and 5, and both are against divisional opponents. Opens with a tough game against the NFC representative in last year's Super Bowl, and closes with the last 3 out of 4 games on the road. But Nick, I think the best way to just go about it will be chronological order. So let's go ahead and start with week 1. And let's go ahead, like you mentioned right before the show to me, let's break the season down into quarters, just like Lovie Smith used to do. And if you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to post whatever thoughts you have about this Bears schedule. Our moderator, Tristan, is over there eagerly awaiting to hear from you. And thank you, Tristan, for running the chat over there. But let's enter the first quarter of the season. And let's start with week 1. The Bears are going to have the Atlanta Falcons coming in at home. The Falcons finished last season 11-5, first in the NFC South, and they were last year's, like I said, representative at the Super Bowl. Of course, we all know about the meltdown, but we're not here to talk about that. So week 1, Bears, Soldier Field versus the Falcons. Nick, what do you think about that game? That's a tough way to start the year.
Someone who made the schedule didn't like the Bears because these first 4 weeks are tough. But week 1 against, a team that was just in the Super Bowl, maybe their offense can slow down just a little bit because they're playing in Soldier Field, and maybe that turf will, affect how the receivers run their routes. But it's going to be a tough one, Will. I mean, with all the weapons that the Atlanta Falcons have, and the MVP comes into town with Matt Ryan, Yeah, this is going to be a tough game for those new cornerbacks, for the new secondary that the Bears are bringing in this season. They get to go against Julio Jones, arguably the best wide receiver in football. Maybe Antonio Brown, which we will face, later.
We got him too.
Yeah, exactly. So this is going to be a tough, tough week one matchup. And like the matchup that I'm looking forward to is it's going to be Julio Jones, and they obviously switch sides with him, but it's going to be primarily either Prince Amukamara if he's starting, or maybe Marcus Cooper if he gets that starting spot. But it's going to take collaborative effort from the entire defense to try and stop Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. But the matchup that I'm primarily looking forward to is Julio Jones versus Prince Amukamara. If he can slow him down a little bit, it's tough because I don't think any really one corner can do it. That's the best way that the Bears are going to have a chance to stay in this game, because they put up so many points, and that's just going to put the pressure all on Mike Glennon, the Bears offense, to try to compete with the Atlanta Falcons offense. And that's just not the way you want to win a game.
No, it's not. Like you said, they scored a ton of points last year. They led the league in with the highest scoring offense, averaged 33.8 points per game, which is it's about double what the Bears were averaging last year on offense. So put that in perspective. But they do have a new OC, because Kyle Shanahan's now in San Francisco, so that might be something to watch as well. At first I was very upset that this is going to be the opener, because like we just said, it's very, very tough way to start the season. But at the same time, Nick, it's going to be a great test to see where this Bears team stacks up against some of the best in the league. And on the same time, now I'm starting to like getting this out of the way early. And if the Bears can compete against them pretty well, if they make it a game, I think it really could inspire this team, feel some confidence for the entirety of the season. And you talked about some matchups. One that I'm looking forward to, maybe it's more of a storyline instead of a matchup, but Jordan Howard versus Tevin Coleman. Me being the IU guy, the two Hoosier running backs going against one another would be a fun show. They never really were on the same team, because Howard transferred to IU after Coleman left for the NFL. But it's still a thing for me that I will be keeping an eye for. But really, week one, tough matchup against the Falcons. Let's move on to week two, which is a good one as well. The Bears are going to be on the road as they travel to Tampa Bay to face on the Buccaneers, who finished last season 9-7, and they were second in the AFC South. Last year, the Bears lost to them 36-10, despite the Bucs being winless at home prior to that point. It was also what I'll call the Bears' worst game of the entire 2016 season. And just remember, Nick, the Bears were winless on the road last year, and they lost all 8 of those games by an average of 13 points. So this is a big game for many reasons. Mike Glennon going back to Tampa is definitely one of them. But when you think about this game, what were the first things that came to your mind?
I'm just thinking Mike Glennon, obviously, since he wasn't the starter last season, I think he would know this Bucs defense really well. Being the scout, having to run the scout offense against that number one defense, I would think he would know the tendencies that those defensive players on the Buccaneers would have. So this gives them a big advantage. I know this is a tough game. Obviously, the Bears got blown out last season when Chris Conte gets the pick 6. It's pretty bad. Yeah. But no, when I was just thinking about this game, Mike Glennon, it's going to be a big game for him. He wants to show his team that obviously they made a mistake. Well, not a mistake. They got Jameis Winston, who's a great quarterback, but obviously he wants to prove to the Buccaneer fans, to the Bears fans, that he can play. And this is going to be a big game for him. If he can do it against Atlanta, because obviously they just played in the Super Bowl, this is going to be a good matchup. Hopefully they play a lot better than they did last year. But the matchup I'm looking forward to, and again, it's our poor, we have to go against Mike Evans, another wide receiver. So again, the secondary, either Amukamara, Cooper, those guys need to be able to go from, hey, maybe we did an all right, maybe we didn't do an all right job of guarding Julio Jones. Well, now you got to bring it again for Mike Evans, and it just keeps on going. The list keeps going on for these first 4 weeks. But yeah, that's going to be my matchup to look forward to right there. It's just the entire secondary. But if you had to put in one guy, maybe Amukamara again, because it's going to probably be our number one against Mike Evans, who is a great wide receiver.
Yeah, no, for sure. And going back to Glennon a little bit, it's going to be interesting for me. I want to see how he gets, what kind of reception he gets there in Tampa, because, he wasn't really that full-time starter. So I really doubt that they boo him. But again, hey, you never know. But really, you know what I'm going to look forward to the most? This is the game where Mike Glennon needs to prove it to not just, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that he has it, but also Bears fans, because this is going up against a Bucs defense where it's A, it's manageable. B, he should know everything about them. And C, it's just, after week one, which is going to be a very tough matchup, for him to go back to his, old turf, his familiar turf, and put on a show would be huge for him moving forward as a Chicago Bear, for sure. So let's move to week 3. And like you said, it doesn't get much easier whatsoever. And we have the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into Chicago, who finished 11-5 last year, and they were first in the AFC North. Last year, they actually had a pretty good defense. They were 10th in points allowed. They were only averaging about 20 points given up per game. And then on offense, they were in 10th in points scored with 24.9. That combo is going to win you, 11 games right there. This offseason, Big Ben contemplated retirement, but he's back. Brandon wanted to note that they did end last regular season with the final 4 games being decided by a touchdown or less. So if the Bears can find a way to hang in there, it could be interesting. But out of this matchup, I'm sure you're going to be talking about Antonio Brown and the Bears secondary. Am I right?
I was going to talk about that, but that'd be repetitive. It's always these wide receivers. They also have Le'Veon Bell, who's arguably one of the best running backs in the league. And you know what? I'm going to look forward to, because he did get franchise tag. So he's going to want to play his tail off and want to earn, show the organization that he is worth that long-term contract in the future. So, you know what? In this, I could have easily gone Antonio Brown versus the Bears secondary, easily. But, I went Le'Veon Bell versus Jarrell Freeman. Those are, Le'Veon Bell being one of the best running backs in the league. Jarrell Freeman, according to Pro Football Focus, and I think that he's one of the best linebackers in the league. So
correct.
Le'Veon Bell, very patient runner, and he really, whenever he gets the ball, he takes a hesitant cop step and then goes and finds the hole. Jarrell Freeman's good at finding the hole, seeing where the running back is going to make go into which gap. So that's going to be a great matchup. And like I said, being franchise tag, Bell's going to want to play real hard. And Jarrell Freeman, if the Bears have a chance maybe to make the Pittsburgh Steelers one-dimensional, so maybe they don't kill you with Le'Veon Bell, they can still do it with Antonio Brown, at least take one of the options away. And I think Jarrell Freeman can be a big part of doing that.
Yeah, and on top of that, this is Marcus Wheaton going up against his former team as well. Things never really panned out for him over there in Pittsburgh. And surely, just like Glennon in week 2, we have Wheaton here in week 3 who's going to be playing with the chip on his shoulder, trying to prove himself against his former team and teammates. So that's something to watch. And you know what? I was thinking about this, and too bad this wasn't last year, because Bell was out for those first 4 weeks, and that would have made things easier. But on top of that, perhaps Jordan Howard versus Bell too, just for the fact of I think Howard finished last season 3rd in the NFL in rushing and Bell 5th. But again, Bell did miss those 4 games, so he kind of gets a pass there. But week 3, not getting any easier.
Not easier.
So let's move into week 4, where I'm not even going to say it because we all know what's going to happen. They're going to travel to Green Bay, who finished 10-6 last year, first in the North, everything we're all familiar with. But this is going to be the Bears' first primetime game. It's on Thursday night, which, remember, last year the Bears played the Packers on Thursday night. Was that Thursday night or was that a Sunday night? For me, I think it's Thursday, right? Color Rush.
Yeah, Thursday. Yep.
Yeah, Color Rush. Thursday. They lost to them, to the Packers in both meetings a year ago. And obviously, Nick, that needs to change here in 2017, at least split the series. The first meeting was that blowout loss after Hoyer broke his arm. The second one was a close game. It was a 30-20 game with Barkley under center. And also, they didn't have Jarrell Freeman or Alshon Jeffrey that game. And the Bears almost had that one. So I'm hoping for that kind of effort here in this game. But that said, last time the Bears played on Thursday night, Leonard Floyd had that great, sack safety on Aaron Rodgers. And I love to see that again. Oh, don't forget, Martellus Bennett is going to be over there. So I'm sure he's going to have some pretty choice words leading up to this matchup. But when it comes to the Packers here in week 4, first Bears game in prime time for the year, what are your thoughts?
It's going to be obviously a great matchup. I think that, again, you mentioned the Leonard Floyd and that amazing play that he had last year. I have him as my matchup to watch out for in this game. It's going to be Leonard Floyd versus Brian Bulaga. And, Leonard Floyd had he was pretty successful against NFC North opponents. I think the only quarterback he didn't sack was Stafford from the Lions. So, I want to see him get after it again and try, improve from that first his rookie season. He was a little injured. If he stays healthy, obviously, tones up his game, he can be even better this season. So that's my match we'll look out for. But Cutler was 1-4 in Lambeau. Glennon has a chance.
That's true.
To already tie that record in, just being in the Bears uniform in his first game against the Packers. So be interesting to see there. It's going to be a tough game again. Of this first quarter for the Bears, really tough. But, the Bears series right now against the Packers is tied 94-6. So the Packers with that sweep caught up to the Bears in the all-time standings. So Bears, they need to get ahead of themselves. They need to at least win one. At Lambeau's pretty tough. It's tough to beat the Packers in Lambeau, but we'll see what Mike Glennon can do, and hopefully he has more success than Cutler did with his time here at the Bears.
Yeah, and another matchup in which the secondary is going to have their hands full. You have Jordy Nelson, but on top of that, something about how Aaron Rodgers plays and how he's able to buy all that time, which is really going to test his secondary more than I think some of these other games, just for that fact. But this leads into a good question that our friend Tristan actually brought up on Twitter. And he wanted to know, Nick, how do you think the explosive offenses in the beginning of the season, so here in the first quarter, is going to affect this defense, especially the DBs going forward? How do you think that these 4 games are going to set up the remainder of the year?
I think it can either go one or two ways. Either it's demoralizing for this defense where, these are really great offenses. These are top 5 offenses, top 10 offenses in the league. And if they have their way with, the Bears with new players coming in, it could be demoralizing them for the season, to continue on. But if they do play competitively, keep games close, maybe they don't come out as winners, but they play competitively, maybe get a few interceptions on these, great quarterbacks, that could be a confidence booster. No doubt about it. So it can go either way, but hopefully it's, the second thing where even if we don't get the wins, they're at least staying with the receivers. They're knowing that these quarterbacks, their tendencies, and if they can play, decent against these guys the rest of the way, I think it's a confidence booster. So hopefully it goes that route for the Bears.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then as much as we talked about the secondary and how much pressure is going to be on them, speaking of pressure, it's actually more as well of the Bears front 7 to what kind of pressure they can dial up on these elite quarterbacks in the league. And if they can get to them, that makes, the Bears secondary, their job so much easier. So as much as we're highlighting those matchups, it all starts up front. And that's something that we need to also keep in mind as we go through that first quarter. But that's it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, if I had to rate how tough that is or how tough it could have been out of the whole thing, it's pretty much a 9, if not a 10, really. It could not have gotten much harder for the Bears in that first quarter of the season. Am I right?
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, that was a brutal first quarter, brutal first 4 games.
All right, so let's take a breath and enter the second quarter. And week 5, the Minnesota Vikings, they come to town, they come to Chicago. They finished 8-8 last year, 3rd in the North. This is the second of the back-to-back primetime games, but this one's going to be on Monday Night Football, which I like because it reminds me of last year's Monday Night Football game against them, in which we took care of business at home on Halloween. But on top of that, what I really like about it, this gives the Bears 11 days of rest in between those 2 primetime games. And on top of that, 11 is my lucky number, so I just have to say that. But, this series was kind of a mixed bag a season ago because when we beat them on Halloween, the Vikings looked to be the kings of the NFC North that season. But like I said, the Bears handed it to them. But then in the season finale, the Bears just fell hard directly on their faces. I mean, they just ran out of energy, ran out of emotion, ran out of confidence after a season that was just thrown apart in every way that we were all too familiar with. But the bright spot is Jordan Howard in both meetings racked up over 100 yards in each of the games, and he actually averaged about 6 yards per carry against the Vikings in that defense. So you have to admit, or at least think, that the Vikings are going to keep a keen eye on him and game plan for him accordingly because they don't want to get, torn up as bad as they did a year ago. So this is going to place a lot of importance on Glennon and the Bears passing attack in this one, I really believe. But the good news, Nick, the Vikings have lost 12 of the last 14 games at Soldier Field. So it looks good for the Bears to get a win, especially after that long break between games. What are you looking for in this Week 5 matchup?
Remember last year when the Bears had a long time off, and it was against the Tampa Bay game. We thought the Bears would come out, fired up, be healthy, but they right on their face, just flat on their face and just, got blown out. I want to see what happens this time around. When they have time, they have 11 days off, like you said, they need to come out and want to play. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And you mentioned it. Mike Glennon is in my matchup for this game. I have Mike Glennon going against Harrison Smith, the Vikings safety. I think that you're right. The Vikings know that Jordan Howard is a threat to them. He torched them in both games, going over 100 yards in each game. In 2 games, he totaled over 288 yards. So Mike Glennon's going to be key for this one. And, that's a great Vikings defense. And Harrison Smith is, the roaming safety out there, very good safety. But, yeah, I want to see the Bears come out strong after having 11 days off, back-to-back primetime games. But they have been able to have success against the Vikings at home. So we'll see if that continues. And I think it will because, that first matchup, they looked great. And the Vikings were on top of the world. Last one, they had Cameron Meredith throwing touchdowns to Matt Barkley. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this time around.
No kidding. All right, so let's move on to week 6, which is going to be at the Baltimore Ravens, who finished last season 8-8, but they were 6-2 at home a year ago. So that's something to keep note of. And fun fact, I was actually at the last game that these two had together back in 2013, which was that 2-hour tornado delay. But the Bears did win in overtime thanks to Josh McCown, Martellus Bennett, and Robbie Gould setting that up. So fond memories of the last time these two meet. I'm hoping to have fond memories again here in 2017. But this is a game where you're going to have Joe Flacco versus the guy who's apparently being compared to. Last year, the Ravens were pretty tough to beat at home, like I said, and I don't really expect that to change again, coming up this season. They are improved from a year ago. They brought in safety Tony Jefferson, Brandon Carr, Danny Woodhead. And this said, I think it's going to be a game in which the Bears actually do have a chance, especially if it's a low-scoring game. I look for this one to be a defensive battle really all the way through. And speaking of battles, Nick, you and I talked about this one in our group meet earlier because I was just so excited when I saw it. But Cody Whitehair versus Baltimore's nose tackle Brandon Williams is surely going to be a dogfight from the first to final whistle. And I'm already eagerly waiting that one because there's nothing better than a dogfight in the exact middle up in the trenches, at least in my opinion. But
oh yeah, no doubt about it. If Brandon was here, his saying, it's all one in the trenches. I know. I had to bring it up, Brandon. You're not here, but yeah, that's gonna be a great matchup. Cody Whitehair in his second year against Brandon Williams, who arguably is one of the best nose tackles in the league right now. And what I was looking at when I was looking at the additions and losses that the Ravens had this offseason, they don't really have many wide receivers. Steve Smith retired, and Kamar Aiken signed a 1-year deal with the Colts. I think that this is a great chance for the Bears secondary to lock down this Ravens offense. I mean, obviously they have Joe Flacco, who's been to the Super Bowl, but he hasn't been the same since then. He hasn't been as great. So yes, they faced those really tough receivers in the past, those really great offenses, the first 4 weeks, really. Now they have a chance to go against a Ravens offense. It's not as good. Doesn't have those weapons that the other teams had. And maybe this is the game where if they still have, a little confidence, this is a game where, it can put it to the next level, maybe get a few interceptions. This is a game where hoping it turns things around for this Bears secondary. And like we said before, it all starts up front with the front seven. If they apply pressure, it's going to make secondary's lives a lot easier. But this is a game where I think they can turn things around, get some interceptions, and get some much-needed turnovers that the Bears have been lacking for the past 3 seasons.
Yes. Well, I really hope it happens before week 6, in my opinion. But again, it's a tough task with those quarterbacks we're going up against. But let's move on to week 7, which is the first of the last 2 games right before the bye, both of which come against NFC South opponents. And the first one, week 7, Carolina Panthers finished 6-10 a year ago, kind of a letdown year for them. But hello, Ron Rivera. Missed you, buddy. But surprisingly, the Panthers, like I said, they were kind of like a middle-of-the-road team a year ago, largely due to their inability to defend the pass. They're actually 4th worst in the league in that category. And on top of that, Cam Newton kind of had to dip in production. But they did address some of those woes by signing a couple new defensive backs. They also added a new left tackle in Matt Khalil, someone who we're all familiar with as he came from Minnesota. And then, of course, they brought in Julius Peppers, which honestly, the more the time passes, it just feels like a lifetime ago since he was here as a Bear. But really, to me, as of right now, this looks to be a winnable game unless Carolina musters up, everything from last season, all their failures and tournament successes. I think this one's a winnable game for the Bears. What about you? Do you think so?
It depends what Panthers team shows up. I mean, if it's last year's, then there's no doubt it's a winnable game. But, go 2 years ago where they were in the Super Bowl, where they were dominant on defense. Cam Newton looked like the MVP. They were throwing the ball to Kelvin Benjamin, running the ball effectively. It depends which Panthers team it is, because last season was a surprise for me, seeing the Panthers where they were at last season. I thought they would have been, the NFC South divisional winners, but obviously that, was the Atlanta Falcons who will face in week 1. It all depends which team shows up. In my matchup for this week, or for the week 7, I have Jordan Howard going against Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly is arguably the best linebacker in the league, and Jordan Howard going in his second year, he's going to see, obviously he will face the Minnesota Vikings defense, really good defense, but he's had success against them. Panthers, Luke Kuechly, and that defense is no slouch as well. So he's got to be patient with holes. I trust the Bears' offensive line. They have a great interior tackles. Not as great, but Jordan Howard versus Luke Kuechly is definitely a matchup. If the Bears want to be successful in this one, set up the play action, Jordan Howard is going to have to run the ball effectively.
This would be a good one too for that, like you said, the interior of that Bears offensive line, either to be sitting Whitehair or Long, getting to that second level and getting some, a block on Kuechly. That would be huge to open up some running holes as well. So that's another matchup inside of a matchup to watch. A little matchup section we got going on here on the Bears Bros today. But let's move on to Week 8, Nick. That's when the Bears are going to travel to New Orleans, a place where the Superdome, which, if you remember Super Bowl 20 correctly, that's where the Bears won the Super Bowl. So it's always a nice time when the Bears end up going back down to New Orleans. But last year, the Saints finished 7-9, and they gave up the second most points per game at 28.4. So hopefully that's going to be a good matchup in which the Bears can put some points up on the board. And currently, it's looking fairly plausible because they still need a ton of help at the cornerback position. So as today, I'm kind of still liking the Bears' chances in this one too, unless it turns out to be a shootout. Then Mike Glennon versus Drew Brees. I don't know what the chances would be there, but I think if the Bears' defense does its job and hold Drew Brees to a minimum, and on top of that, maybe the Bears really had a very heavy ground attack and took care of time of possession and kept Drew Brees off the field, maybe. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you there. And you know what? The New Orleans Saints offense didn't get better this offseason with, trading Brandon Cooks to the New England Patriots. They have Willie Snead out there. It's really Drew Brees, trying to, win games for the Saints. That's what it is on offense. And then their defense, has not been very good. I think that's the right formula for the Bears to win. It's to keep, running Jordan Howard, keep Drew Brees off the field. And a big way that they'll be able to keep Jordan Howard on the field is if Bobby Massey, who's going to go against Cameron Jordan, one of the best DNs in the league. So I think that, obviously Glennon is not a guy, if you get pressure on the outside, he wants to stay inside the pocket. So we need to keep him. You need to keep Jordan away from Mike Glennon. And like you said, if it's a shootout between Drew Brees and Glennon, despite Brees not having the weapons that he usually had in New Orleans, I'm still going to give it to Brees. He's one of the best in the league. He's done it, year in and year out. But yeah, this is a game where I look at it on the schedule, maybe they get a win against the Panthers, keep that momentum going and, end that second quarter of the season strong and, go into the third quarter.
Exactly. It's a perfect time for a bye, I think, in this season. I think it's a great spot for it. But real quick on those Saints, I know he doesn't play, but you have to admit Ryan Pace has this one circled on his calendar as well. An organization he was with for 14 seasons. I'm sure he wants to show them what kind of team he's built here in 3 seasons, and hopefully one that can hand it to him and give the Saints an L in that upcoming season. But yeah, Week 9, the Bears are on a bye, so I'm going to go on record and say they are not losing a game in Week 9.
You're
but
right.
with that, Nick, we've reached halftime, which means it's a perfect time to go ahead and take a break and remind you, the fans, to follow us on Twitter at the Bears Bros. And if you aren't one of the hundreds of Bears fans who receive our free email newsletter, sign up today at thebearsbros.com/subscribe. That way you get all of the notifications each and every time that we're going to go live. Our analysis post-game emails are also pretty big, and we're also planning some interesting new ways to make that newsletter even more appealing as the season gets closer. Maybe we'll do some inside look at training camp, since we always like to pride ourselves on our training camp coverage. We'll see. We'll talk about that later on. But let's enter the third quarter of the season. In Week 10, right back up against the Packers. But it's really good, Nick, that the Bears have that extra week to prep as they go against the Packers for the second time. But this one's at home. They don't have to travel anywhere. So they have a ton of time to rest, get healthy, refocus, and then you have Green Bay coming into town. Do you have anything to add about this week that we didn't talk about the first meeting of the Packers?
The Packers secondary is not very good. And when I was looking at matchups, and, the first week I went with Leonard Floyd. But this week, I think that Cameron Meredith has a good chance to establish himself as that number. Obviously, he's going to be the number 1, but he has a good chance against his secondary, who has Devon House. And looking at the Pro Football Focus ratings, I mean, obviously Brandon would not, approve of the ratings, but Cameron Meredith has a good chance of, torching the secondary. And I think that, all the Bears, the entire offense, wide receiver wise, can, do some damage to this Packers secondary. They showed the flaws in the NFC Championship game a season ago against, obviously, the Falcons, who have a very good offense. But I think that the Bears, going against this weak secondary can, do some damage.
Yeah, no. Well, that'd be great to see. I really don't know yet. Obviously, that's a lot to still play out. Who knows? Week 10. What happens if Kevin White's still playing in Week 10? That's a big one.
That'd be great.
I mean, we haven't seen that yet, so that's something to keep an eye out for. If Kevin White can make it through the bye week, I almost call that a success in some aspects for him.
I would.
All right, yeah, exactly. All right, so moving on to week 11, the Detroit Lions, which going back to week 9 in the bye, I really think the Bears would be wise to do their homework on both of these teams while they have the extra time to go ahead and do so, because if they do it correctly and you can formulate a really strategic game plan for both the Packers and the Lions, you can perhaps snag 2 divisional wins back-to-back coming off your bye. And just imagine what kind of momentum that would build to do so. If you win those last 2 games before the bye and then 2 divisional games right after, that's 4 games, and that's a lot of confidence heading into the final stretch of the season. So this might be the pivotal moment. Like that 5 weeks might be the pivotal moment of the year. But going back to the Lions, again, the Bears played them fairly well last year. They beat them at home, 17-14. And they only lost by 3 points in the second meeting, 20-17. So both games obviously fairly close and very hard fought. And both teams are improved from a year ago. And I look for the matchups to be very close again in 2017, and just like last year, I expect these games to be decided within a touchdown. And I like to always talk about this stat, and that's last year, Matt Stafford threw 10 interceptions, and the Bears had 4 of those. So hopefully that continues. But what did you see in this matchup?
Like you said, they were very close games last season. I thought the Bears should have swept the Lions. And remember when Daniel Braverman caught that pass over the middle and got taken away from a penalty? It was a penalty.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness. But yeah, I think that the Lions are beatable. They showed they were beatable last year. We got one of them. Should have got the second one. And I think they can do it this season again. I think that, yes, they both have improved, but I think that the Bears can edge them out. I think they have a little bit more this season than they did last season. And the matchup I'm going to look for is Golden Tate versus Bryce Callahan, working in the slot, the nickel corner, and then obviously Golden Tate in the slots. I think that's going to be a big matchup. They locked down Marvin Jones last season. I think they'll be able to do that again with their corners. But yeah, we were able to get to Stafford, able to get some interceptions on him. So I think that, if within the division, these two will be the closest for the Bears. Maybe, the Vikings will get one of them. Packers, it's always tough to beat the Packers, but Lions, those 2 games, on the road and at home are going to be the 2 closest in the division, I think.
All right. Moving on to week 12. Now, this is another one where I have circled on my calendar as the Bears traveled to Philadelphia to play Alshon Jeffrey's Eagles. They finished 7-9. That sounds weird coming out of my mouth. I think it's the first time I actually verbally said it, so I need to let that sink in. But Alshon Jeffrey, he's an Eagle now, just in case you didn't know. The Eagles finished last season 7-9 after a pretty strong start to the year. And if you remember correctly, the Bears lost to them last year, week 2, on Sunday Night Football, 29-14, after a really terrible third quarter collapse by the Bears that pretty much showed us what kind of season that we had in store. But presuming that Alshon is healthy, going up against him is, to me, the biggest storyline by far. But other than that, what do you see coming out of this matchup or this game?
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit on it. I put that Alshon Jeffrey is an Eagle. He's going to want to torch us. But, I mean, it's going to be weird seeing him in, green. And I just don't know. It's weird seeing, a guy that I loved his whole entire, just if he was healthy, can produce, didn't have the fluctuating quarterbacks here in Chicago. It would have been great to have him here. But yeah, the Bears need to show that they can get to Carson Wentz, which they didn't do the first time.
Right.
Yeah. And that third quarter debacle that they had last season against the Eagles, really, I mean, that made me hit the panic button. Remember I hit the panic button, week 2 or what was it?
Yeah, I think so. But I think now looking back, I think that was a well-warranted time to hit the panic button.
Yeah. So, I mean, they got to go out, show that the second-year quarterback is nowhere near the quarterbacks that they face in the first 4 weeks, and just show them that, hey, they're ready. They're here to play. They're not going to do what they did against us last year. And this is a good game to do it against. And, show Jeffrey, hey, the secondary got better. We'll see what you can do against us.
Yeah, and on top of that, the Bears really know Alshon's game, inside and out, what he's good at, what he has trouble with. So I think they can really, key in on him a little bit. But that said, that chip on his shoulder is probably going to be quite large. So we'll see what he brings to the table in that game. And on top of that, Carson Wentz, year 2, is he going to be taking that jump, or is he maybe going to have that sophomore slump? All things to keep in mind. But hopefully the Bears still have a very bitter taste in their mouth from that loss a year ago and take care of this one. But that said, it would be a very, very tough task in Philadelphia for the Bears to go ahead and do that. But going back to the 4 games prior, because I just like getting excited about the Bears season, if they end up winning those 4 games, who knows? The momentum might be able to swing in their favor, especially because week 13 rolls around. And then you have the San Francisco 49ers, who were 2-14 a year ago, last in the NFC West. We beat them 26-6 in that snow game with Matt Barkley at quarterback. Jordan Howard rushed for over 100 yards, and Leonard Floyd had a safety. That was, one of the bright spots last season. It's also the 3rd straight year that the 49ers come to play in Chicago. And also, don't forget, Matt Barkley, Brian Hoyer, and what's his name? Logan Paulson. Yeah, whoever that is. Will return to Soldier Field. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fare up against the new Bears secondary, in my opinion. Whoever's lining up under center, either be Hoyer or Barkley, I hope we get a few sacks on them on that Soldier Field turf one last time. But looking at this matchup, what are you keeping an eye on?
I'm keeping an eye on Akeem Hicks versus their center, Jeremy Zuta. I want to say that's how you pronounce his last name. But the both are very great players. And if Akeem Hicks can cause havoc in the middle, Hoyer's not a very lateral quarterback. He's not going to beat you with his feet. So if he can disrupt them in the middle, that will definitely benefit the Bears. But yeah, it's going to be weird seeing Hoyer, in a 49ers uniform. But yeah, I think the Bears have a good chance of winning this one. They obviously beat them last year. They have to use Jordan Howard to do the same exact thing they did last year. Maybe they'll actually be a first down in the first quarter. Is that right? There weren't any first downs in the first quarter in this first matchup.
Gosh, it was that game, wasn't it? Yeah, that was awful.
Yeah, that was. Hopefully, that's not the case. Maybe we get 1 first down. Well, we'll see. But yeah, it's. I think it's December 3rd, right before my birthday. So the last one I think was on my birthday. I don't remember what it was, but hopefully get a win. It'd be a nice little birthday gift. But we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Oh, all right. So let's enter the 4th quarter of the season, which consists of 3 of those 4 games being on the road. But the opponents are definitely beatable. So it really depends on what kind of Bears team shows up. But week 14, they travel to Cincinnati. Not much of a travel at all, but they take on the Bengals, who finished last season 6-9-1, 3rd in the AFC North. And I expect the Bengals, really from last year, I expect them to rebound a little bit. They have 11 picks at next week's draft, so I think they're going to definitely be a bolstered squad. They did only give up 19.7 points per game last season, but they did give up over 100 yards on the ground on average. So another game to look for Jordan Howard to be one of those X factors in it. And fun fact, the last time that these 2 teams met was Mark Trestman's debut, also Kyle Long's first game in the NFL as a Bear. So that's going to be a special moment, at least for Kyle. Probably not for Mark if he's ever watching that, but moving on to you, what pops out to you for this game?
Well, I look at the Bengals offensive line. They lost their starting right guard, and he signed a 5-year deal, $60 million with the Browns. And they also lost their starting left tackle. And last season, the Bengals allowed Andy Dalton to get sacked 2.6 times per game and allowed 41 sacks, which is 7th most in the NFL. So the Bears front 7, had 37 sacks in the league, which is tied for 12 or had for 12th in the league. So it's a great opportunity for that front 7 to get after this Bengals offensive line, who's missing 2 starters on there. And I look at for my matchup though, I go on the other side of the ball. I go Geno Atkins, their DN versus their nose tackle versus Josh Sitton. That's going to be a great matchup. 2 guys that are obviously one of the better players at each position in the league. But yeah, this is a great opportunity for the Bears to get after Andy Dalton, who, he's all right. He one and done in the playoffs, is mediocre at best. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. And I think if the Bears can get to him early, I think it's going to increase their chances of winning and, just maybe increase that winning streak from, that bye week and then continue it on.
So optimistic.
We are. It's all right. Give it a few weeks.
Yeah, breathe, move on, go back to reality, and we'll move on. But it's all possible. Nothing's impossible when it comes to the NFL. But moving on to Week 15. Now, this is a weird week. We take on the Lions on Saturday, so that's totally weird. Saturday at like 3:30. So definitely mark your calendars, because if you wake up and forget about it and you end up like going out for the day thinking the Bears play on Sunday, you're going to be in a very upset mood when you find out that they actually played on Saturday. But just a couple notes for this matchup, because we already talked about the Lions a little bit. The Bears still have not won in Detroit since Lovie Smith's final game back in 2012. Jeez. And also, Brad Biggs pointed out a really interesting stat line here, that the Bears are now 1-7 against the Lions ever since Lovie left, and they were 13-5 against them when he was the head coach. So another reason to miss Lovie Smith if you don't have enough already. But Brandon, anything different for Week 15 that you didn't have for the first time that we played the Lions?
Wow, Will, you just called me Brandon and you didn't even realize it.
I did not. Nick.
But no, that's okay. I wish Brandon was here too. I know. But
I'm just missing.
We're missing you, Brandon. But the only matchup, I guess, just to not make it the same as the first one, I'm looking at Kendall Wright, our new wide receiver, versus DJ Hayden, their nickel corner, who's not ranked very well in Pro Football Focus. But we'll see what Kendall Wright can do. Reestablish his career with Dow Loggins. He was successful within his first in Tennessee, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's an interesting stat with Lovie Smith. The success he had against Detroit, and ever since then, the Bears have struggled to win against Detroit.
Yeah, which I think is obviously coupled with Lovie's departure, the aging Bears defense, and Detroit actually getting kind of better as time has passed. So just definitely a recipe that's not been in the Bears' favor as of late, but who knows? We can turn around here in 2017. But let's move on to Week 16, the final home game of the year versus the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, the team that finished 1-15 a year ago. Honestly, Nick, what do we even say here? I mean, it's the Browns. At least we're going to get a good look at their backups and practice squad guys in the week 4 of the preseason. But really, all I have here is if the Bears lose this one at home, I don't know.
As a fan, if I went to the game and saw the Bears lose at home to the Browns, I'd be pretty disappointed. It's only 2 games left, that one, and then obviously the Vikings next week. But man, you just can't lose to the Browns. And I already have as my matchup, I have Myles Garrett going against Bobby Massey. I mean, I think that I just don't think there's no way they can pass up the number 1 overall pick with, Myles Garrett. But it's the Browns. Like we said, it's the Browns.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's pretty smart putting him there already, but maybe you jinxed it, so maybe he falls to number 3. I wouldn't complain, but exactly. All right, last game of the year, Nick, Week 17. We're going to travel up to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Just like we did a year ago, the Bears obviously didn't fare so well in that season finale, but again, they had nothing else to fight for. And really, if they won, we might be picking a little bit later here in the first round. So all things considered, I'm over that loss. But moving forward, hopefully they don't repeat that season finale. And just a reminder, remember Lovie Smith's final game that we beat Detroit? Well, that was the last time that the Bears actually won a season finale all the way back in 2012. So this is another game where we can maybe start riding the ship a little bit, because hopefully the Bears can actually get that season finale win and end the season on a high note. Who knows what the record would be at this point, but either way, that would be nice. Again, another divisional opponent, Nick. So anything different that you didn't have the first time?
Changed up the matchup. I went inside with Eddie Goldman, who, for some reason, I kind of just forgot about Eddie Goldman for some reason. I don't know, maybe with the injuries, and I didn't have him in any of the matchups earlier, but I have Eddie Goldman in their center, Joe Berger, whatever, however you pronounce it. Berger. But yeah, I think interior, depending on who is playing quarterback for, the Minnesota Vikings, could affect that easily. I mean, I don't know if Bridgewater's going to be back, but it would be nice to see the Bears actually finish off the season on a high note, get a win. Despite the record, you go into next season knowing that you improved, hopefully got more than 3 wins at the end of the season. And, that would be nice.
That would be. At first, as we went through this schedule, I was very hesitant to predict any victories for the Bears or a stretch of victories by any means. But as we've gone through it, I think we've definitely determined that there are some favorable spots in this schedule for the Bears for sure. But now that we've gone through it all, do you want to make a prediction for the next season, or do you want to maybe wait until after the draft?
I would want to make, I'm going to wait and see what the draft does for all these teams. Actually, I want to see how they improve. What we do at number 3 is really critical to whether or not we have a player that's going to be an impactful player from day one, or maybe that developmental quarterback. So I want to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm sorry, you guys probably wanted to hear what I was going to predict the Bears, but yeah, I'm going to give it till after the draft, and then I can give you maybe a better answer than I could right now.
Sure. All right. So overall then, how do you feel about the schedule? Anything you really like or anything that you really dislike about it?
Obviously the first 4 weeks are awful. But as we went through it, that one stretch where they have a chance after that bye week, the bye weekend against the Panthers, Saints, that bye week, Packers line, maybe that's where they turn, hopefully they have a couple wins before that, but where they can gain some momentum. And I didn't even realize that before we were even talked on the show, but as we were talking about it, it gave me a little more optimism going into this next season, because I looked at the first 4 weeks. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a rough one. And then the last 4 weeks, we only have one home game, but they're winnable against winnable games. So there, you can look at this thing as, and once you get past first 4 weeks, what are the Bears going to do then?
Now, imagine if they somehow split those first 4 games. Imagine what kind of year could happen after that. But let's not even get that far. But like you said, this season is almost perspective, how you feel about it. You can be a half glass full guy or, a half glass empty kind of guy, depending on, your current outlook on it. But for me, I'm going to be a half glass full kind of guy. I think there are some definite favorable stretches where if the Bears pick up some wins, build some momentum, you don't know what can happen. I'm not going to predict good things because maybe I want to be a good thing, but you don't know. And I expect that this team's going to be improved from a year ago. Prove it. I think they'll prove it early on too. I think they're going to really hang tough with those, those first 4 weeks, maybe sneak one out. But then you're sitting at 1-3, and I think the majority of Bears fans sitting at 1-3 might be a little upset. But look at that schedule one more time, and then you'll realize that's not actually too bad. And then from that point forward on is pretty much this the season's in the Bears' hands from that point forward on. From the second quarter of the season all the way through the fourth, it's whatever the Bears make of it, and that's exciting, but also makes me kind of nervous all at the same time. But one last question before we go, Nick. Out of all those games, the biggest question that I haven't asked you yet, which one do you think we need to go to for our meetup in our post-game show at the Bus Tailgate?
Yeah, very true. Are you thinking a cold one this time? Cold games are a lot of fun. That prior to that Jaguars game, I went to one Packers game. It was warm. All the previous ones were all in December and somewhere in January when we were in the playoffs. I went to, championship game and then also against the Seahawks. I've always been a cold game kind of guy.
Are you trying to go see the Browns? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Oh God, that's right. Never mind. We're not going to do that.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like,
oh, man. That's a good question. I mean, Bears versus Lions, week 11. That might be, I like seeing
division's good. For me personally, I had the Panthers circled. I don't know why, but I thought that might be a pretty good matchup to go.
Week 7. But, I like that one
right now without Brandon. I'm sure he'd love that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we'll get it discussed and we'll let everyone know which game we'll be at, and hopefully people can, definitely, if they're at the game, stop by, say hi.
Yeah, exactly. The tailgate at DeBust, if you don't know about it, it's pretty huge, pretty awesome. And we're working with the guy who runs it, Timmy, to try to find a way to do our live post-game show from the tailgate, which I don't have to tell you would be pretty awesome to get that kind of atmosphere into our show with all the Bears fans who are hopefully jacked up after a Bears victory. So just talking about that, gets my blood pressure raised just a little bit. So I'm excited. I'm sure you are too. The Bears season schedule came out today. Not the best of openings to it, but again, maybe it's one of those bittersweet things where they knock out the tough stretch and able to take that confidence and move forward. Nick, any final thoughts about the schedule, about the upcoming draft? What are you thinking about right now?
Now we have the schedule set. Now next Thursday we have the draft, and I cannot wait. I'm just going to sit down and watch. Well, obviously we'll go live once the Bears go up, but I cannot wait to see what the Bears do. There's been all this speculation, all of our mock drafts, everyone's mock drafts, everyone's talking, but now next Thursday we'll finally, next Thursday through Saturday, we'll get to know exactly what the Bears are doing, and I'm so excited to see what they actually do.
Yes, we will, and I am excited just like you, Nick, but I think that's going to do it for this episode. I want to thank you all who are watching live or listening live as well, and thank you to everyone who has downloaded this podcast, wherever it may be as well. We appreciate you all so much. We can't even put into words, but we're going to be back on Monday night with our final Bears mock drafts, so stay tuned for that because I'm sure Nick's going to surprise someone again with his third overall pick. But until then, take care and bear down, Chicago.